Very warm welcome, everyone, to Education South Asia seminar. This is our 8th seminar in the series. And today we'll be discussing a very important topic, very critical topic of education and environment in South Asia. If you're joining us today for the first time, let me introduce the seminar series very briefly. Since July last year, we've been running this series of seminar on the theme of education in South Asia. And in this seminar series, we've been continuing the conversations from our online conference that we had organized last year titled Rethinking Education in Post-Pandemic South Asia. And we are taking those conversations forward through this Education South Asia network. And if you've already if you've already signed up for this network, thank you very much for signing up and being part of this work, collaborative work. And if you haven't signed up already done so, please do sign up for our mailing list, and we'll keep you updated on our activities. This is a platform for discussions around various issues related to education and South Asia, and we are looking forward to taking our work forward in more collaborative ways in future. So please do sign up and please keep in touch. We are very pleased today to welcome you all in today's very exciting roundtable. And I'd like to invite Mohini Gupta to introduce our panelists and moderate today's session. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you so much, Uma. I'm in a strange situation where there's a fire alarm going on in my building. If you just give me a second, I'll just begin, if that's okay. I'm not sure if I can be seen, but thank you so much for introducing the series. Yeah, and our panelists are here, so we're really excited to have a really exciting session on environment and education today. Is my voice clear to everyone? Sorry? Yeah, okay, sorry.
Yeah, it's you're visible and you're quite audible. Okay?
Yeah,
are you okay?
Yeah, as long as the ambient sounds don't interfere.
Sure.
Great. So I'm going to begin our session for today. We're really excited to have our panelists here, Dr. Lalit Pandey, who's the founder of Uttarakhand Sevanidhi Environmental Education Center in India. There's Padma Utsal, who's the director of SECMA Ladakh in India. And there's Sonam Norbu, who's the founder of VTOB Educational Solutions and Services in Bhutan. My name is Mohini Gupta. I'm a DPhil candidate at the University of Oxford, and I'll be moderating this session today. In a world of climate change, we're now at a stage where it has really become difficult to ignore this burning question of the relevance of education, of an education in the environment. We're going to hear today from people who've been leading pioneering initiatives in this field, all of them sort of set in fragile ecological zones themselves. And we're going to know more about their experiences as they have carved this space for the environment in mainstream education. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite each panelist to introduce their work to us, and then we'll get into some questions and answers. And at the end, we'll also invite questions from the audiences. So I want to now begin by inviting Dr. Lalit Pandey, who's a social worker and environmentalist, who's the founder of Uttarakhand Sevanidhi Environmental Education Center in India. Dr. Pandey has received engineering degrees in India and the USA. Questions about academic excellence and social relevance led him back to his ancestral home in a small town where he'd never lived earlier. For the last 35 years, he's been involved in an environmental education program in the hills of Uttarakhand. The government of India awarded him the 4th highest civilian honor of the Padma Shri in 2007 for his contributions to environmental education. Lalitji, welcome to the session. Could you please tell us a little more about your motivation to go back and work at Uttarakhand Sevanidhi and the changes that you have seen in the field of environment education over the last 3 decades? And also, do you feel if there's a greater need for this kind of education today, and is this need at all being fulfilled? So I'm going to hand over to you now, and then we'll move on from there. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Mohini. I'll talk about our environmental education course. called Our Land, Our Life. The origins of this course started almost 40 years ago when an astute observer, the late Sri Madhavashi, am I audible?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, yes.
Okay. The late Sri Madhavashi, who lived in the hills, and he started thinking about the difficulties of the ordinary people living in the area and in the villages particularly. For example, development schemes target only economic betterment. And although millions were being spent, the lives and hardships of the people were not really being solved. He realized that poverty associated with land degradation needed attention. And we come to the concept of ecological poverty and the recognition that hill agriculture is dependent on the forests, fodder for cows, farmyard manure, and bullocks for plowing the fields. Thus, the human population, cattle, agricultural land, and forests could be looked on as an ecosystem. And the health of this ecosystem defined the well-being of the people living in it. So it was felt that educational effort, both in the formal schools and the community, would be the best way so that people could become aware of the root causes of their difficulties and could begin to find solutions themselves. The National Education Policy of 1986 provided an opportunity to start a program. I come in thereafter. A workbook was developed for schools and it was trialed in one school in 89. And over the next 15-20 years, the program was initiated in about 500 schools when the education department decided to incorporate it as a regular subject in all schools of Uttarakhand. As far as I know, this is one of the unique experiments wherein a small effort initiated in the NGO sector kept growing organically and was mainstreamed in the formal schools. We have been involved in this for almost 35 years, and our work has been developing the content, the workbooks, teacher training, expanding the number of schools gradually, evaluation, both internal and external, feedback from different stakeholders, revising the workbooks accordingly. Many administrative issues had to be dealt with, and we also have been able to reflect and document many of our experiences and learnings. Let me now talk briefly about the content of the workbooks. It uses the village as a laboratory, and it is practical and quantitative and an ecosystem approach. That means understand the linkages between the different entities. For example, we have vets for animal health, doctors for humans, agriculture and forestry experts, but the ability to see it as a whole is lacking. Students learn local history from village elders, geography by making a map of their village, simple concepts of arithmetic, geometry, for example, by measuring the area of land on a hill slope. What species of trees do we need for fodder, fuel wood, or timber? Is there adequate water in the village for human needs, animals, irrigation? If the population is increasing, will it exceed the carrying capacity of the village land? Thus, the course attempts to give students the knowledge and skills required to understand and solve their problems. Learning by doing and real life problem solving. Some reflections. Students enjoyed the course. They could relate it to their lives. Parents were a bit skeptical. They would say, we have sent our children to school to learn something. They do not value their own knowledge, but they liked being involved, for example, in village history. Some teachers did not like doing practical work in the village. Also, it took 2 to 3 trainings for teachers to grasp the underlying principles. Since most teachers are local people, they appreciated and confirmed that the course describes life in the village. But will it help my son to get a job? Also, they felt disempowered to take the initiative, a finding confirmed by a South African educator who had similar experiences. Teachers like orders from the senior officials. And the question it raises, could it be the after effects of long years of colonialism? Since we started bottoms up, teachers became principals who became senior officials. So everyone was familiar with the course. So it was slightly easier to do it, but it took quite a long time. Some other thoughts. Our course conflicts with other views on environment. For example, pure conservation and mainstream thinking where the objective of education is getting a city job. And in some ways, science. For example, we say chemical fertilizers to increase production, but chemicals are harmful. So what does the student learn? Where and what is the problem? And who will solve it? It's not a simple linear cause and effect. One needs systems thinking. And the last point I would like to say is that transformational learning is not so easy. Thank you. I hope I'm the time limit.
Yes, very much in the time limit. Thank you so much, Lalitji. It was really fascinating to hear about your model and so important to customize curriculum to local environmental issues as well, like you said. So thank you so much. And we'll come back to talking about some of your work as well. Thank you so much for being here. I'll move on to our second speaker now, who's Padma Utsal from Ladakh, currently working at SEC Mall as a campus director. So Utsal, along with his team, runs SEC Mall, founded by Mr. Sonam Norbu in the year 1988. They focus on alternative learning systems and teach life skills to the youth of Ladakh in particular and people across the globe in general through hands-on learning. Prior to his 3 years at SEC Mall, his specialization has been in educating youths of remote villages of Ladakh through short-term camps and workshops, also as a freelancer in ecotourism industry and in running the Utsal Academy, which was an initiative to support students in clearing fundamental concepts of math, science, aptitude, and English. So Mr. Utsal, thank you so much for being here. Could you talk to us a little more about the innovations that sort of happen at SEC Mall and how does it operate differently from conventional schools in the region? I'll hand over to you.
Okay. First, I want to check my audio. Am I audible? Is it clear?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. First of all, thank you so much, Mohini and team, for giving me this opportunity. And it's such a wonderful platform for us and other, audience listeners to get some perspective about education and environment, which you have rightly mentioned. These two are critical things that everybody should be aware of in the 21st century when we see rapid development. Yeah. So before I talk about how we run SECMOL, I just would like to touch upon how SECMOL started, right? So SECMOL started in the year 1988. So the reason was there was a failure in education system, mainly talking about the government schools where the education system was a complete failure. And you would be surprised to know that the pass percentage back in 1988 used to be only 5%. And then Mr. Sonam Norbu and other like-minded youth discovered that, actually there was a failure in system until, 1988, you may say. Everybody believed or thought that there was a problem with the students who were not performing well. But the main problem was with the system, and that was the reason there was a high percentage of failure in 10th grade. So that's how SECMOL started, and it started with a very different vision where we train students with various practical skills and knowledges while keeping in mind the culture and traditions of a particular region. Mainly, this is in context of Ladakh. So that's why SECMOL stands for Students, Educational and Cultural Movement of Ladakh. So after several years of intervention, then SECMOL started this big movement called ONH. So it's an Operation New Hope. So the idea of Operation New Hope was to reform, the education system, to fix all the problems that was there in the education system. So that was the main reason of formation of Operation New Hope. So what we did through Operation New Hope is, the education, when it comes to talking about education, all the textbooks at primary level were not relevant to the Ladakhi students. They had to learn the concept and all the knowledges that were completely irrelevant to Ladakh. So they would like have to learn concept like fans and elephant, which they have never seen before. But unfortunately, they had to study all this concept, and students would have hard time getting all this concept. They cannot actually relate with the environment. So it was, the big mistake that was there in the education system. And we thought that we need to contextualize education. All the textbooks of primary level, especially the environmental related textbooks were rewritten, and it was made contextual to Ladakh. So and then all the teachers were not trained, so they would just hire the teachers from outside, and they would let them serve in far-flung areas. But unfortunately, what happens is teachers, like since they are coming from outside, they cannot bear the harsh weather condition in winter in Ladakh. So schools remain closed for nearly 2 months, like winter break. So there's a lot of problems with that also. Then through the Operation New Hopes, many local teachers were trained, and they were sent to all the government schools, and most of the teachers were locals. So that's how it started making impact in the education system, the primary level mainly I'm talking about. And the medium of instruction, unfortunately, was not Ladakhi. Actually, it should be Ladakhi, but it was not there. All the subjects, all the books were in Urdu until 8th standard. And after that, what do they have to do is they have to shift to another alien language, that is English. So there's a big transition. First, like they didn't have the opportunity to learn in their mother tongue, and then when they clear 8th standard, they have to adopt another language. They have to learn in another alien language. So all the textbooks were rewritten, and also it was converted into English medium. Initially, like it was all in Urdu. So students had a lot of burden, and that was the main reason there was failure, high rate of failure in 10th grade exam. So that's what we thought, if we strengthen the primary level education, then we can create a big impact. So with this aim, through this Operation New Hope, SECMOL trained teachers, textbooks were made contextual and rewritten, and also villages were also trained. We encouraged all the parents to participate. Then village education committee were set up. So through this, what happens is like the village education committee will take the ownership. They would take the ownership of the school. Like, how if we compare the government schools and private schools, so there's a big difference in management. So what happens is like before the intervention of parents in school system through village education committee, there was like hardly anyone who would take serious responsibility of running the schools. So after the intervention of parents through village education committee, then school started functioning very well. So then like over the period of time, it has improved a lot, and today, like so it started in 94. Around 2006, the pass percentage rose from 5% to 50%, 60%, and today on an average we have like 70-80 percentage in 10th grade. So that is how this initiative has been successful. And so after this, I would like to touch upon how SECMOL alternative campus work, like how it is like function. So here we, like every year, we train around 35 students. We run a specific course called foundation course, for which all the students are from 10th grade. So all the problems is still not fully solved, but there are still a failure. Those students, there are many students who still fail in 10th grade. So for them, we thought of setting up this campus in 1994, SECMOL Alternative Campus, which is just nearly 20 kilometers from Leh City, the main capital town of Ladakh. So there we set up SECMOL Alternative Campus, and this on this campus, the idea of giving education is very different from other schools. We call it education of learning by doing, and educations, from 3 R's to 3 H's, we call it. So what I mean 3 R's to 3 H's is like 3 R stands for reading, writing, and arithmetic, and 3 H's stands for bright head, kind heart, and skilled hands. So what happens, unfortunately, is many alternative, many conventional schools, like they do very well in equipping students with this 3 skills, 3 R's, like reading, writing, and arithmetic, calculation, and all that. They do very well, but unfortunately what happens is they lack this education of 3 H's, which is again very important. Education of hands, education of heart, and education of head. So with this vision, we created a small eco-village, Segmol Alternative Campus, where the education would, where students would acquire skills in, various fields. So students would acquire environmental knowledge, students would acquire traditional knowledges, students would acquire, various other values and life skills. So that is how it was envisioned, and we have been successfully running it for the past 30 years. So the admission, for this school is the eligibility criteria I would like to talk about. One has to be a failure in 10th grade, then they become eligible for this course. And we also, it's not that only failure, we also encourage gap year. We also encourage students from other backgrounds who have cleared 10th and 12th standard, but they want to take a gap year and want to learn life skills. So we also give opportunity for those students. So yeah, as far as environmental issues is concerned, we have been trying our best to educate all the youths of Ladakh in particular, and other youths in general across the world and across the world, where our campus is like a small eco-village where we live in harmony with nature. So one of the path-breaking innovations that I would like to talk about is all the residential complexes we have is passive solar heated. We call it passive solar buildings. So what happens in Ladakh is in winter, the temperature drops down to minus 25 degrees centigrade. And many people would either, use tons of fuels to heat up their rooms, or they would shift to another place, like warmer place, like Delhi, Jammu from Ladakh. So they have no solution for this. But Segmol has found this solution by simply using solar energy. We have been living in this eco-friendly solar heated building for the past 30 years without having to use even a single drop of fuel. Otherwise, it is very the weather condition is very harsh in Ladakh in winter, and people cannot stay inside room without any heating. So here the campus is designed in such a way that we would create least of harm to the environment, and at the same time we also give this practical education to our students who come here for the foundation course and other courses that we have throughout the year. And also that is like one of the main I think the examples and innovations that the rest of the Ladakh and other places where they have good sun's energy, like solar energy, they can replicate it. So now we have expanded it to many other institutions and armed forces. So it's very good news that they are understanding and realizing these values. And there's something we are very content with. Like we are very happy that people have realized and replicating it. And also we have as far as the general for running the campus, we would need electricity and all that. For that, we also have small, solar power power plant through which we generate our own electricity. We are not dependent on the power source from the government or other sources. We are completely self-reliant. So yeah. So this is the main idea of this Segmol campus, and moreover, it is like students run campus. We talk about democracy. We talk about making educations more interesting, practical, education we talk about. But what happens is we talk a lot about this on global, many global, big platforms, but we fail to implement. But here we have been practically implementing and teaching students with all these skills, and we are making our students to run the campus instead of us, teaching everything. So if we make them run the campus, then students become more responsible. They actually learn by doing this. So otherwise, if there is teacher and other mentors behind the students every time, it doesn't teach them a lot. So we make them face challenges, we make them face obstruction, all that, then through that they learn a lot, all the practical skills. And talking about the practical educations is
Mr. So I'm just going to come in for a minute to say that we should just wrap up at this point and move on, but then we'll also come back to sort of talking about more. So sorry.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, I can come back later.
No, if there's something that you wanted to complete, please go ahead, then I'll move on.
Yes, just I wanted to finish with the practical aspect of education. So we have students running the whole campus. So we have all the management, maintaining powerhouse, maintaining dairy, and maintaining gardens, and all that, everything is run and maintained by the students, and students have their own government also. So we talk about democracy. So we teach students democracy and democratic institution by actually implementing it, actually making them fight elections. And so we have 3 students who elect their favorite candidates. These are called campus chief, academic minister, and work minister. That's how we make the education relevant, instead of teaching them through textbooks, which becomes a big burden for them again. So that's how we have been trying to relate education with their real life problems, so it becomes more interesting. So what I wanted to wrap up with these things, that we have to create a reason for the students. So instead of if we want to teach something, we have to create a reason so that lessons becomes more interesting for the students. Instead, what happens is we blame students for not paying attention. So it's also the onus is also on the teachers or whoever is there. So they have to create some reason to make it relevant to their life problems. Then the lessons become very interesting. So yeah, I think you may have question, then I can come back later.
Thank you so much. That was really interesting. And we've been hearing so much about the SECMO school, but it's good to hear in detail how the innovations take place. And I think it's so important to talk about learning by doing, like you said, in the practical aspect of learning. So thank you so much for sharing that. And we'll come back to some questions as well later on. I'm just going to invite our final speaker for today, Mr. Sonam Norbu, who's an edupreneur, social worker, and a lifelong learner. Sonam has been a teacher for 12 years. Sonam has been a teacher for 12 years, and he's currently founded VTOB Educational Solutions and Services, which is a community-based organization and institute. And he's also founded a few social enterprises that aim to enhance educational engagements to nurture active citizens through consistent quality services that are innovative, problem-solving, relevant, and affordable. He has also led Teacher Volunteers, which is a group of 6,000 plus teachers in 2020. Where the team provided continued education to more than 170,000 students during the school closures in the pandemic. Sonam promotes climate education, waste management, and education for sustainable development through design for change and other educational platforms. So Sonam, welcome to this session. Thank you so much for being here. Could you talk to us more about the work that you do with VTOB and also your personal interest in climate change that you've been working towards? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the... Am I audible?
Yes.
Thank you for the elaborate introduction. I would like to have a screen share, if that's possible.
Of course, you have the permission on Zoom to share the screen now.
So is my screen visible?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you so much. First of all, I would like to say that I'm very humbled to share a stage with a lot of esteemed panelists, and I would like to thank Ms. Mohini for the opportunity that you have given me. So I'm quite humbled, and I come here with a lot of passion and with a lot of personal experiences that I would like to share. So I come from Bhutan, and I would like to say that we are an environmental champion as a country, and we derive that from the inspiration from our far-sighted noble monarchs. We have been really leading, I would say that in terms of environment and education. For example, Bhutan is the only the carbon negative nation, and our constitution mandates 60% of forest coverage. And as of now, we are proud to say that we have more than 71% of current forest coverage. And our country as a nation also continues to do research and takes actions and initiatives. For example, we entered the Guinness World Record for the most number of trees planted in a day. So we have organizations such as Bhutan for Life, Bhutan Trust Fund. We have a lot of our nation's forests as parks and sanctuaries reserved. So I would say that we come from a place where mountains are respected as abodes of gods and goddesses, where a lake is considered to be like a place where a local deity or something supernatural is. And we come from a place where forests and flowers are considered as offerings to the gods and goddesses. And also the rivers are considered so sacred. So every part of environment, as simple as the soil, the earth, is respected. And every time we do something to the earth or we start a construction of a house, we try to appease or we try to get permission from the gods and goddesses so that we move forward. So I would say that environment and education is instilled in the form of the culture and tradition that Bhutan has. And I would say that this is infused in the children and in the form of education in the schools. And which brings me to the next point, where I'm proudly saying that schools lead in environmental action. We have nature clubs, we have scouts, we have waste management initiatives, we have Social Forestry Day. Social Forestry Day is celebrated every year on June 2nd, where every school plants trees. And from this year, we have started to plant fruit trees. And Social Forestry Day is also the coronation day of our fourth Drugelpo, who is a champion of environment, and he has been bestowed, or he has won a lot of environmental global awards too. And another club quite popular in sharing or in trying to spread education for sustainable development is UNESCO clubs. And lastly, but not least, the curriculum infusion is something that I wanted to share here. Because in every curriculum, in every subject in the curriculum in Bhutan, we have environmental values and environmental actions and environmental knowledge infused in it. For example, we have a separate textbook or a subject called environmental studies, and that is how schools are leading. Now, when it comes to VITO, a small community-based organization who is trying to enhance education engagements through a lot of activities that will create or nurture active citizens, I would like to select these three as something that I can share to this platform. The first one is Waste Warriors Initiative. The second one is Design for Change. And the third one is Education for Sustainable Development. I would like to share a little bit on each of it in the next few minutes. The Waste Warriors Initiative is something different. Most of the waste management initiatives comes with physical and the technical part of waste management, whereas the initiative that Vito initiated when it comes to Waste Warriors is about mindset management. We believe that whatever surveys or whatever technical things are provided, if the mindset is not managed, waste management would be a big failure. So we try to start with the mindset management so that the waste management happens. So this is an initiative which is happening as teacher-led initiatives in more than 100 schools in Bhutan. And we derive a lot of inspiration from His Majesty Drugelpo in terms of Waste Warriors. He has clearly stated that Where we live must be clean, safe, well-organized, and beautiful for national integrity, national pride, and for a bright future. These two is nation building. And I unquote His Majesty Drugelpo, Jimmy Sonam Norbu. So this is how Bhutan takes forward or takes pride or takes importance or significance of environmental education. And this is a very small, a simple example of how we try to infuse waste management practices in the schools. This is one of the waste segregation sites in a lower secondary school in Bhutan. And the next one that Vito from 2021 is working on is Design for Change. Design for Change originated from Riverside School in India, where Ms. Kiran, who is a global educationist and who is a change maker, initiated this, where children are believed to be change makers. So through this initiative and through this campaign, what we are trying to do is we are trying to let children identify problems that they can solve and give solutions by themselves. So environment is one of the biggest thing that we are trying to tackle through this changes, through this initiative. And the last one I would like to share is education for sustainable development. We believe that development at any stage should be sustainable. It should not be, should not be turning every green forest into concrete forests for the achievement of materialism or for the achievement of a lot of other things at the cost of the environment. So at schools and at Vito, what we try to do is we try to teach people to practice sustainable lifestyles and sustainable living, so that they provide and they learn that they learn the importance, the significance, as well as the connection, interconnectedness of the environment. So lastly, I would like to say that Bhutan, through its values, practices, culture, lifestyle, and the national vision of gross national happiness, is placing a lot of importance on environment. And of course, this is infused in education. So I would say that I'm very proud to share that this is something that I wanted to share to Ms. Mohini and your team and to the viewers here. So thank you so much. And if I have any questions in the next round of the panel, I would be very happy to take it. So that's something coming from Bhutan. And I'm very happy to share stage with Sigmols, Mr. I forgot the name, so sorry for that. We also believe that we should keep our head and heart true with our we should keep our hands true with our head and heart. So thank you so much. With this, Mohini, I'm signing off.
Thank you so much, Sonam. If you could stop, yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. Thank you so much. That was a really fascinating presentation, and really was great to see all the images that you shared as well. It really sort of drives home the point very, very deeply. And it's really wonderful, all the initiatives that you've been working with. So thank you so much for sharing them with us today. We have some questions from the audiences. I did have one or two questions that I wanted to start with. So maybe I'll start with one question, and maybe we'll invite some questions, and we'll keep the conversation moving for the next 20 minutes. What I wanted to say was that since all three of you work in the Himalayan regions, Uttarakhand, Ladakh, and Bhutan, I was just wondering, what are the particular challenges of running the initiatives that you run in ecologically delicate zones like the ones that you all live in? And do you feel that it's an even greater priority to focus on environment education in the Himalayan regions, and why is that? So that's my question to all three of you. Anyone can come in. Please feel free to switch on your video and audio and come in and respond to this. Thank you.
Okay. Should I try answering your question?
Yes, please, please.
What I found is that there is a big difference among local people, their aspirations, their needs, and looking at this Himalayan region from the outside or a casual visitor. Because we also work with communities, and with the sort of general high level of education now available. For example, in the villages, you can't find a girl. I mean, every girl is educated more than schooling, maybe BA, MA, which was not so 20 years ago. Plus, with mobiles and roads and television, the aspirations of the youth are very different now. And if we think about, because unfortunately there's a conflict between conservation and development. And I think that is the biggest, and there is somehow a misconception or a conception, a common narrative that the Pahari woman is a great conservator of forests and trees. I think this needs to be revisited because the younger generation has completely different aspirations. So beyond a point, how will you keep them?
Very interesting. And you brought up the gender question, which is also very interesting to talk about. I'd love to know more. But I want to ask Mr. Utsal and Mr. Sonam if they have anything to add to this question.
Yeah, I just would like to add. So yeah, you have asked about the environmental challenges, like whatever initiative we take, what challenges we face. So yeah, actually there's a lot of challenges. Ladakh being in Himalayan, look, all the Himalayan regions, when we talk about like one of the main problems that we face in today's world is water scarcity. We are mainly dependent on glacial melt water. So we have like been trying to educate people about, how we can change our lifestyle, but with the development, it's very hard to convince people. So it's very important that I think educating all the youths from the very young age, from primary level, from educations like school education, college education, this need to be instilled strongly, so that I think everybody would have this sense of caring for the environment. That seems to be lacking, but despite our effort, like we can create an awareness, but if people do not implement it, so that's very hard. I think if I talk in context of talk about it in context of development, the kind of changes that are now being taken place in Ladakh is unprecedented. There's booming tourism industry, and people are also changing their lifestyle. Because of that, there is a lot of pressure on the environment. So we cannot stop that immediately, but it's very important that if we instilled the sense of caring for the environment, and if we educate people about the environmental fragility, so from the very young age, that will, I think, help. But that seems to be lacking at this point of time. So that's like something I wanted to add on. It's not only if we are talking about the Himalayan region, so it is like many. If you go back, if you look at all the villages, in the Himalayan regions, they have this simple life. They do not actually harm environment. Their lifestyle is such that their livelihood is such that they are like they are in like close harmony with nature. But unfortunately, because of their lifestyle or the development across the globe, so they have to, like we have to, suffer because of this. So I think Mr. Sonam Norbu himself has epitomized this concept of simple living. Like he has started this initiative, I Live Simply, so that people can, contribute in the form of pledge. So if people around the world start living simply, that it can also help in healing the environmental crisis that we are facing today. Yeah, that's what.
Very interesting. Thank you so much. Sonam, would you like to come in as well?
Just a quick note. I would like to say that when it comes to challenges, Vito always believes in transforming challenges into opportunities. So as far as I'm concerned, and as far as Bhutan is concerned, I see a lot of opportunities than challenges. However, like if I have already mentioned the opportunities in my presentation, However, if I would like to state few challenges that we might or we are facing, would be the rapid development or the rapid development of the nation or the global rapid development, as well as the need for the passing of the heritage to the younger generations. Otherwise, the rich heritage would remain as a thing of the past. So something that is there. And the other thing would be, I think, due to the increasing consumerism and the lifestyle practice, just as Mr. Padma has mentioned, if people start to become like consumerists, and if we continue to consume at the rate that we are consuming now, I think it will be the biggest challenge that we might face, because everything has an impact on the environment. So these three are the things. However, I would like to restate that these are some things that are looked at very importantly, and these can be considered small, but in the schools and in the National Assembly, the highest level of government system, we are discussing this, and we are always having measures to have this. So I think we have seen a lot of opportunities, but these challenges are also there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sonam. I'm conscious that there are quite a few questions coming in, but I also wanted to just wrap up with the last question, then I'll invite the audience questions in as well. So thank you so much. That was a really interesting sort of dichotomy between conservation and development that we've talked about, which I would love to know more about. But we're going to move on to just talking a little bit about education before we move on to the audience questions. I just wanted to know that you've all talked about, brilliant ways of innovating in the fields that field of environment studies, in terms of all of the initiatives that you run. And I was wondering that how open are mainstream education systems to how open are they to adopting these innovations within formal schooling systems? And how has your experience been in I know that, say the Uttarakhand Sevanidhi, I know that their curriculum had been adopted by state schools for many years, but not anymore. So I'm just wondering, what is the interaction with formal school systems, and how open are they to really adopting these innovations that your initiatives have come up with? Feel free, anyone, to sort of come in for this question.
But we right from the beginning, we decided that we should work with the schools, because if you have to make any change, the government school system is the biggest thing. If you run a small, one isolated school, yes, we can do much more. But whether the change will be across society is, and as I said, I mentioned some of the issues, when you're working with government schools. We, as it so happened, we went from one school to 5 schools. It grew up organically with more teachers and more principals joining in. But normally that's not the way things are done. It is just introduced from the top. So we have a lot of experience on that. And as I said, the biggest conflict is the aspirations of the local people, and this idea that particularly women, somehow that the Pahari woman is naturally a conservator of forests and all. Now, the young generation, there is a complete change all over, even in very interior villages. So we have to take into this reality, because after all, these people live here. Otherwise, they'll be left with the feeling that we have been left behind and life has gone forward, So how to do this is, because you can't tell them that, look, you should live like this in remote areas, while we in the cities, because they also have access to what's happening in nearby cities and all. They live differently. So we have to resolve that question.
Thank you so much. I think it's a really important point that you raised about the aspiration of young people today, and that must be taken into consideration. Thank you for that. Sonam and Utsal, would you like to come in for this as well?
So I think if I'm talking about in context of SECMOL, it's very easy for us, because we have only this specific standard students, 10th grade, who all are at our campus for a year. So whatever they do know curriculum we have, we can do it, implement it with ease. But when we wanted to, if you talk about adopting or replicating it in other conventional schools, so it becomes a bit hard. So what happens is like there's in the mainstream, they already have this proper curriculum, rigid structure, where they, what I've seen is most of them would be hesitant to, go for an alternative learning. So they say what they have is like they have this pressure of exam and finishing syllabus and all that. So from that we cannot expect the innovations and creativity from the students. So if we like could instill some sort of innovative curriculums and like creative things in the normal structure, then we can expect some good results or changes from the students. But I think one of the main problem that we see is because of this rigid structure that it's a bit complicated. But it's not that we have never been approached by any concerns. Like we have been approached by many curriculum designer, like at our national level education policy makers. They approach us and take ideas from us. So I think we can expect some changes in future. But as of now, it's like we still have to go a long way. And like recently, the government of India came up with new education policy. What they like, I really like the idea. So they, like I was talking about educations of 3 H's, like practical life skills. So those are there like in the national education policy. The mother tongue is again one of the main important, I think, factors. So if we teach students all the concept at the primary level in like mother tongue, and if we introduce various life skills activities at primary level, then we can definitely expect a change in the education system. We can expect more innovative ideas. So you can take a lot. We already have a lot of examples before us. All those people who have done wonderful like things, who have come up with innovative ideas, they all have gone out of the mainstream educations. They believed in themselves and they like worked on their imagination and creativity. That's why like all the innovations and creativity we have is like because they stepped out of the mainstream, because they did not follow the this rigid structure. I'm not saying that's not it's also good, but at the same time, for the innovations and creativity, so such kind of things should be there in the education system. Yeah, that's like what.
Great, thank you so much. I think it's a very practical consideration to think about the things that you said, like finishing curriculum and all of those things that make it a challenge. But thank you for also sharing those details from the new education policy that talk about in the focus on the importance of environment in education. Sonam, would you like to come in as well before we move on?
Yes, it's just a quick reiteration. I think I would like to share about a curriculum change that happened in 2009 called Educating for GNH, which means Education for Gross National Happiness. And through those things like the green school concept and the curriculum infusion came in. So like I was presenting in my presentation, I think environmental and education has been synced so well. And it is like even to teach maths, the problems and the word problems are woven around environmental values and like ethics and all. So I think as a small nation, I think I would say that Bhutan has the advantage of being small, that any change is quite possible. For example, there was once this trash tag challenge, which was just announced overnight, and it just goes to the whole of Bhutan within no time, and even the Guinness World Record tree plantation. So I would say that the mainstream education acceptance of environmental education is a big thumbs up in Bhutan. So I think it's something that I would like to share to the platform, that if environmental values and information needs to be like infused and to be nurtured into the children, I think including itself as education for sustainable development as one approach and as part of the curriculum is a big thing that we all need to look into. So Bhutan has that advantage. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that, all three of you. We don't have too much time, but there is one question from Andy Smart. Andy, would you like to switch on your audio and ask the question directly?
Yeah, thanks very much, Moini. And I really enjoyed these three presentations. Thank you. I had a question for Padma. You kind of answered the question in the chat box, but I wanted to pick up on what you said, Padma. You talked about some possibility for hoping that some things might change in the formal school curriculum. Some of the curriculum specialists have approached you and your school for ideas. And I wonder, do you see in itself the textbook-based system as being a sort of an obstacle to ideas, or there is room for incorporating some of the approaches and ideas from your schools within the formal textbook-based curriculum system? Thank you.
Okay, yes, thank you, Andy, for your questions. Yeah, I think so. You have asked about how we can incorporate it with the formal education system, the educations of 3 H's, right? Yes, this is something we can adopt. The other schools can replicate this idea of education of 3 H's. Like, unfortunately, at this point of time, they are mainly into textbooks. We have to understand the students' learning capability. Not everyone can learn from textbooks. We should have an alternatives, for students who have different capabilities for different mode of learning. So unfortunately, like, what happens is, like, in most of the schools, these alternatives are not there. So it's very important that if we could have this alternatives in other conventional schools, it will really help for the students to achieve what they aspire for. Not 100%, I'm sure, but we can definitely incorporate some ideas if the people whoever is responsible for running the institution, if they are open to this idea, we can do it. But I think it may also take some time. We can't do it immediately, because it always takes sometimes to change to something new idea. So there is possibility if the concerns are open for such ideas. Otherwise, it would also be quite hard to incorporate ideas. I've already talked about how because of this rigid system, there is some sometimes there's a problem. I hope that answers.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you, and thank you, Andy, for the question. Maybe we have time for a final question. There's a question from Rohini as well. Rohini, are you here? Would you like to ask your question? Oh, Rohini is not able to unmute. Okay, so it's not, her audio is not working, so I'll just read out her question. Rohini says, this is a great epistemological premise to revive, thinking of environment as places of sacred co-creation rather than byproducts to be preserved after industrial use and human consumption. How do you think this, carries forward to extremely neoliberalized global higher education contexts that speak of development and exploitability as employability? The question is on the chat as well. If anybody would like to come in and just give some final thoughts on this question, then we'll wrap up. The question around ideas of development in higher education context. So, yeah.
I think the thing is that you can't tell the poor or the disadvantaged that you can continue living as or go back in time how we lived traditionally, because they are so disadvantaged. And it is all right for people who have gone out of it to say that no, life was great 100 years ago, or traditional living is what we should, because they are not living, and those who are living in that traditional life want to get out of it. So it is I think this is what I have learned. We have done some studies also on slightly formal studies with girls and with women. For example, all this burden is then put on the women in the village. No, it is not the men who are supposed to do all this conservation and fetching the water and all these things. So that perspective doesn't come. What are the women thinking, which till now were supposed to do? So I think a lot of social changes have occurred and are occurring, which, and when you change one thing in your social life, then many other values change. I think this is a topic for a much larger discussion.
Yes, I agree with you. Well, thank you so much for answering that question. And thank you, Rohini, for the question. Sonam and Utsal, would you like to say anything as final thoughts before we wrap up?
Okay. This is quite a tricky question. And like, I would like to say that it is something that is quite obvious that everybody should be looking into it. And just as Mr. Lalit has been, Dr. Lalit has been mentioning, it's quite interesting to tell people to live back. However, like, I derive the quote from like our fourth Drukyalpo, living the middle path or going the middle path. And one of our like core like pillars of gross national happiness talks about social economic development in terms of sustainability. So I think if we are careful and if we tread carefully through the middle path, we can have development with environmental actions and with environmental like significance or importance in mind. For example, like we have green zones in the cities, or we have like parks and sanctuaries that are already like meant to be there. And one of the biggest things that we always brag about, we always talk about, is the 60% mandated forest cover. So these are some things that as a nation, like we can always go forward. However, like development with mindfulness or development walking through the middle path is the key answer that I would like to answer here. And of course, the younger generation and the present generation who lives in the world of neoliberalism and all should be educated in such a way that they should have the mindful mindset, which always makes them aware of the importance of climate change, the impact of global warming, and so on and so forth. I think it's something that we should not be really not knowing, but it's of sheer importance that everybody knows that. I think that's something that I would like to add on. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sonam. It's really an important point. Utsal, would you like to just end with anything before we wrap up?
Sure. So I totally agree with my co-panelists. They have like put it in a very beautiful and crisp manner. So I have nothing much to say. Just want to say that we cannot, stop the change. As Buddha, like change, is the law of nature. We, cannot stop the change, but it has to be in a responsible manner. So, whatever changes are taking place, I talked about how the problems, environmental problems that we face in Ladakh. So that is happening in such a, pace that we can easily ruin or the environment, in no time. So those are like something that we have to understand, at this point of time, we have alternatives. We cannot stop the people for the changes they want, but we can have a sustainable option. There will be, if we do not let it happen, so there will be a big gap between, the rich will become richer and the poor will become poorer. So if we, the co-panelists have rightly said to follow middle, path. If we take it in a responsible manner, then we can go for the development. But if it is happening in a haphazard manner, then we can do nothing. So we have to take the action at the right time in a responsible manner, like a sustainable manner. Then we can have both prosperity and environmental protection or conservation. Yeah, thank you. With this, I would like to.
Thank you so much, Utsal, Sonam, and Dr. Pandey for this really brilliant conversation on environment and education. We're really glad that we could have inspirational professionals like all three of you who work on such brilliant initiatives to talk here about, Uttarakhand, Ladakh, Bhutan, and the larger questions of development, sustainability, conservation, and the environment, especially in a moment like today. So thank you so much. I think what we really try to do in these sessions is to also bring in challenges and similarities that occur in so many different regions and nations. And that sort of opens up the space for so much collaboration across nations as well. So I think that's also been a really productive conversation today, and just discussing how issues are different but also very similar across regions. So thank you for bringing all of these issues out for us and articulating them so beautifully. And also thank you to all of the audience members who've been here and listening and asking such great questions. We're going to, we're sort of wrapping up the Education South Asia seminar series for the summer now. But we've had a brilliant series of conversations and sessions. So thank you to all of you who've been regulars here and, been asking questions and engaging so much with our speakers. And please do continue following us. We're Education South Asia on Oxford Education South Asia on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We keep posting details about our next sessions, and hopefully we'll come back in the next academic term around October with some new sessions and new things in place. And do sign up to our mailing list as well, so that we can keep you updated on anything that goes on at the project. So thank you so much once again to all our panelists and our speakers, and thank you, Uma, for making this series happen and making Education South Asia happen. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here.